How did I do?
I was not very interested when it was announced that a new Batman reboot was in the works, especially after the somewhat bastardization of his character in the Snyderverse.
I'm gonna murder you and then your whole family.
But then the trailers started to come out, and my mind was almost immediately changed. It looked like it could be a legitimately interesting film with a fresh new take on Batman, seeing as how it was supposed to be about his first 2 years of crime fighting. So the film finally came out, and after 2 delays, I've gotta say, this is one of my new favorite Batman films to date. Now, to get this out of the way, since a lot of people are gonna ask, comparing this film to The Dark Knight, I do think that that film is better made, with a tighter plot, villain overall had some degree more compelling characters, though I think that this film is a better Batman movie overall, but I'll elaborate on that later. Firstly though, the overall atmosphere of this film was wonderfully done here. It's dark, it's drab, it's filthy, it's perfect. It fits perfectly here, and it just makes Gotham City feel like an actual hellhole that no one wants to live in, because it's not the over-the-top industrial jungle that the Burton films were, or just straight-up Chicago like the Nolan films, which didn't really give it any flair, besides it just being Chicago, but with Batman. Compared to here, where it has a mixture of neon-lit billboards lining the skyscrapers, trash covering the streets, and construction buildings being completely abandoned. When I saw the inside of Bruce's residence in the film, with the Gothic architecture, I knew this was Gotham. The city also perfectly shows how corruption has gotten so bad that basically no good can come of it at all. Like, an issue people always bring up is why can't Bruce just donate money to charity and help people? And that is actually kind of used as a piece of the story here, and things have gotten way worse, even with him helping like that. It's basically so bad that Batman may be the only solution that can actually help fix the city at this point. Him beating the ever-loving crap out of criminals is the last alternative that can actually work. The fights here are also really well done. Although not having the absolute clearest views of the action and a few too many cuts at points, the styles and moves within them are so well done. They play with the lighting a lot of the time, with it either being in the blinding lights of a nightclub, or the muzzle flashes being the only light source in a narrow hallway. So although the fights aren't the best I've ever seen, they have interesting styles that allow them to actually seem different and unique. Even the chase scene with the beast of a machine that is the new Batmobile, it was filmed pretty exclusively from both the interior and exterior of Penguin's and Batman's vehicles, giving it a much more rough and dangerous feel. Plus, the roughness makes sense, since this is only a year 2 Batman, so it's obvious he's not going to be an every perk unlocked in Arkham Knight kind of Batman, which make the fights seem more grounded and not as one-sided. I mean, Batman gets his ass kicked quite a bit in this film, so it does make those situations seem tense. The characters here are all great and acted perfectly as well. Zoe Kravitz does a great job as Catwoman, giving her more depth beyond a thief who just steals stuff for fun, and makes her pretty caring. Jeffrey Wright is now my favorite on-screen depiction of Gordon, where he legitimately feels like a cop doing his absolute best that he can do at this job, and the relationship he had with Batman was great. The chemistry between the two was perfect. It felt like it came out of the animated series perfectly. Andy Serkis wasn't in the film enough for me to have a genuine opinion on his Alfred, but he was pretty good for when he was on screen, and I can't wait to see more of his depiction of the character in future sequels. Colin Farrell made me laugh at his depiction of Penguin, where he's used more as a somewhat comedic relief character in the film, and he does a great job at it. He didn't feel out of place, and the humor, and humor in general, was pretty funny. It was dry, and it fit well with the tone and feel of the whole environment that was going on. Paul Dano was truly terrifying as Riddler, finally making a somewhat silly character an actual scary psychopath. Scenes with him felt so tense as they play up the mystery of him and what he's capable of. It was great. Then of course, the Batman himself, Robert Pattinson, does a terrific job here. He's able to make his interpretation not only of a brute who beats the shit out of people, but also a detective who looks at the evidence and is able to figure out the mysteries with deduction and logic. That aspect specifically was always an issue for me in previous films, where Batman could totally beat everyone around him mercilessly, but never showed him being the great detective that he is. Additionally, I think Pattinson's portrayal of Bruce Wayne was a little jarring at first, since we're more used to the playboy version of him. And although I think it does make it a little odd since there's basically no difference between his portrayals of both Bruce and Batman here, I think it does work, especially since this is a point where Bruce has been so consumed by his drive for vengeance that he's basically become an outcast by himself, which leads him to having to learn to be a symbol for Gotham through the course of the film, giving him a pretty nice character arc, honestly. But with all good things, I must complain about small, insignificant points. Firstly, with the third act, where I think Paul Dano goes a little bit too over the top with his performance as the Riddler in the interrogation scene, where it felt like he was trying really hard to seem insane, and it just came off as a little too wacky. Like, it wasn't bad, but it made me laugh, which I don't think was the intention of the scene, nor the character. Next, the only way Batman figures out the final riddle is by coincidentally finding out about a specific piece of evidence from someone who happened to be there with him at that exact moment and know that information, which felt kind of off and really idiotic. Like, I get Batman's not truly the world's greatest detective yet, but having that weird of a coincidence happen is just odd. Especially seeing as how the reveal of the last riddle happens at the exact same time as Riddler's master plan unfolds, which makes that seem more unnecessary. The lighting was also super dark for most of the film, making it pretty difficult to see what was going on at points. And I get it, that's what the film is trying to do. But when a film is so dark that I have a hard time seeing conversations, I think that's a bit of an issue. And finally, the scene hinting at Joker at Arkham Asylum had me facepalm. The scene honestly just felt out of place more than anything else, where it felt more like an end credit scene that would be at the end of a Marvel movie. And we've had enough of the character already. I think it's time to actually use someone else besides Joker. Batman literally has the most famous rogues gallery in comics, filled with some of the best villains in fiction. So please, for the love of God, use someone else. And since I already started this a little bit in the beginning of this video, I will go a bit more into the discussion on this film in The Dark Knight. Like I mentioned, that film I believe is a better made movie in my opinion, where the story fumbles around somewhat towards the end in The Batman, in it relying on a coincidence to get to the final set piece, and certain moments of importance such as Bruce learning the truth about his parents, and then less than 10 minutes later having that cleared up by Alfred with almost no time for it to set in, compared to The Dark Knight, where there are virtually no issues like that, where I can't honestly think of a coincidental moment that was integral to the film. Not to mention the relationships between characters felt more realized, unlike Selina and Batman's out-of-the-blue romance in The Batman. Additionally, it had a more compelling villain who had a true presence over everyone throughout the movie, especially with an unparalleled performance by Heath Ledger. But where the Batman may falter somewhat, it makes up for in understanding Batman's character better, whereas The Dark Knight, it wasn't entirely about him. And he did have a massive role in the film. We got to see Batman a lot of the times, but at the same time, we might have gotten to see an equal amount of Bruce Wayne or other characters. Where this film actually looks into the character as more than just a punching machine, but as a hero for everyone to look up to, and how he can truly help Gotham, with not his money, but with hope. The film is like 90% Batman and is set at night for almost all of it. Being able to show us that character and keep a story working like that in that kind of setting is truly great. But besides those minor issues and having to live up to a god-tier film, The Batman is a fantastic movie that proves that there is still life in the character. It does a great job of bringing us a darker version of him, but not only one that's so grounded or gritty that he's just another Christian Bale, but one that we can see being a fighter, detective, and a hope for Gotham City, not just someone out to beat every criminal to a pulp. So with that, The Batman for me gets a 9 out of 10. If you haven't already seen it,
Which you probably should have already seen.
please go check it out. I cannot wait to see what they can do with the sequel. The possibilities are endless for it. But in the meantime, where Marvel has been churning out a lot of bland films and TV shows, all having to be connected to each other, it's nice to see a project like this where it just focuses on a single character in their own world with no connections to anyone else, and still be this good. But I plan on going more in depth with this film later on, so I'll just be working on that one in the background for a while, and getting some other reviews out going forward.